Well, it took 22 years for the UFC to finally return to the Queen City here in Buffalo, New York. And in the end, for better or worse, the fans in attendance left with a few things to talk about. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. It is very early morning here in Buffalo, Sunday morning to be exact. The post-fight press conferences just wrapped up. And we have a lot to discuss with our special guest, Mr. Jon Pollock of the Fight Network. Jon, UFC 210 is in the books. Let us first start with Daniel Cormier. He retains his UFC light heavyweight title. He submits Anthony Johnson, this time in the second round. And afterwards, Anthony Johnson announces retirement. Hold that thought. Let's talk about the fight. The big story is Anthony decided to try to out-wrestle Daniel Cormier. What are you thinking when you're seeing this unfold?
I think we, much like Daniel Cormier, were all puzzled, and even afterwards, Anthony Johnson pretty much said that it was, as much of a shock to him. I mean, he was like, he almost said like he was just going in there to fight, and the wrestling was definitely a curious decision because Anthony Johnson looked very good in the first round rather, with his striking, and it seemed that Daniel Cormier was stunned more than anyone that wrestling would be a part of Anthony's game plan.
Dominic Cruz had, I thought, he made a very astute point on the broadcast. He said that Cormier is going to let him try to out-wrestle him because he's so confident in his ground game, and it's only going to tire out Anthony Johnson. And then we saw what happened in the second round. I mean, once Cormier got comfortable on the ground, he submitted him rather quickly. Do you think that there is any, there's any proof to what Cruz was saying, that he did actually tire himself out?
Well, I got to speak with Daniel briefly, and, he really enforced the fact that in this fight, he was going to make every inch of this fight a war. He wasn't going to give a thing to Anthony Johnson, and that was specifically designed to wear him out early with the clinching and just forcing Anthony to expend as much energy as possible. And I don't know if Daniel was thinking at such a degree that he would provide an opening for Anthony to suddenly wrestle him, but of course that was going to take a lot of energy out of Anthony Johnson. And as we previewed this fight, I think we all looked at the later this fight goes, you certainly have to look back at the first fight that was Anthony's downfall. And I think in this one, Daniel was going to make this a war of attrition right from the get-go, clinching, making this ugly, and making sure that Anthony Johnson was somewhat affected cardio-wise going into the second.
DC kept saying, let me get past the first 7 minutes, I'll be fine, and he almost nailed it exactly. He weathered that storm, and he ends up submitting him. Then afterwards, he says, let Rumble talk first. I think in hindsight, that might have been a mistake because he completely stole his thunder with this announcement that he is done. Rumble Johnson retired out of nowhere. Absolutely no rumors of this going into the fight. What do you make of his decision and his explanation? He said that he has some kind of job that he is committed to. He won't tell us what it is, but he called it lucrative. What do you make of this all?
I think this was this trumped the wrestling in terms of something that was really surprising to many people afterwards. The fact that Anthony Johnson, at the age of 33, retiring, and afterwards, I mean, he stated that he made this decision a while back. It's a very lucrative job, whatever it is. And the fact that win or lose, he was going to retire. And I pressed him on this, stating that, listen, you were preparing a championship training camp. You had to have had those thoughts of that championship being presented to you. Would this have wavered? And he seemed really steadfast that this is a decision he made, and he was going out, win or lose, Jon Jones fight dangling for him or not, that he was going to go out. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to what such a lucrative job is, but the fact he's 33, Ariel, and that we have seen so many fighter retirements, I think this is one that you kind of have to hedge your bets as to, have we really seen the last fight of Anthony Johnson's career? Because that would not stun me if 2 years from now Anthony Johnson is looking back, especially as a guy who could fight at heavyweight, where 35 is not that old.
Right, yeah. He actually said at the beginning of his press conference, with certainty I'm done. And then at the end he said, maybe I'll fight Jones at heavyweight. So we'll see what happens there. Then Cormier comes on the mic, and he's just going all over the place. He's spraying everyone with his words. He's going after Jimmy Manuwa, who's cage side, then of course Jon Jones. And to me, this was Chael Sonnen 101, and he even acknowledged it, Cormier did at the press conference. I'm setting up future fights. Did you like what he did on the mic? Essentially saying, boo me all you want, I don't care. In your world's terms, going full heel.
Yeah, I mean, he was the one who made the comparisons to Roman Reigns as he
Yeah.
was getting booed, and just he was in love with this segment on Raw last week. I mean, right down to Roman Reigns and Daniel Cormier's opponents retiring right afterwards as well. So, I mean, there was quite the parallel there.
Only you can make that connection.
Well, I'm here for some
Yeah.
reasons, Ariel. But no, I thought that Daniel Cormier used his time very wisely because he has set up 2 fights for himself. The obvious with Jon Jones, that I think that is where the biggest demand is going to be. But if there is some hiccup along the roads, and I mean, we've seen many of them involving Jon Jones, Jimmy Manuwa is there. And I'm not saying that Daniel Cormier and Jimmy Manuwa is going to be the biggest fight in the world, but I think that you look at the different level of draws in this business, and you have your top end. Daniel Cormier and Anthony Johnson filled 2 buildings, and I think Daniel Cormier goes into this a lot bigger of a commodity than he was a year ago, and that could be tested with Jimmy Manuwa. I think that this light heavyweight division, it's showing a lot more momentum than it was a year ago as well, just given these opponents that are now emerging.
Which fight interests you more, DC Manoa or DC Jones 2?
Definitely the rematch with Jon Jones. I think that is something that you look at all the problems that Jon Jones has had, the somewhat lackluster performance against Oben St. Preux, and just the run that Daniel Cormier has been on. That was not a fight that when it happened the first time, I thought that the rematch would be as appealing. You know that the grudge element is there, and that's going to be a big component. But this is also 2 of the best fighters in the sport competing, and I feel that Daniel Cormier has added a lot to his game, even at the age he is at now. And with Jon Jones, there's so many questions about him. Is he at that same level that he was in January of 2015? So I think that is certainly the fight everybody does want to see and appears to be the fight to make.
I have said now countless times that I think Daniel Cormier is the most underappreciated champion in UFC history, and that he is currently, because Jon Jones is serving a suspension, the pound-for-pound king. Fans do not agree. Not only that, they are either indifferent towards him or boo him vehemently. Very few cheers for him, even tonight. Why do you think fans treat him this way?
It's a great question because he's an outstanding personality. I mean, he is someone that I think is very much respected by people, but I feel that Jon Jones has, I think as he's emerged and kind of accepted this role that he's been placed upon, I think people just gravitate towards him. I think they felt for so long that they were getting a packaged version of Jon Jones, and he's kind of just been, hey, this is me, this is who I am now, and people have embraced that. And with Daniel Cormier, he's someone that it's like this guy has almost been too perfect along the road, but there's an interest in him. It's not as though people are sitting on their hands. It's not as though people are not buying tickets to go see his fight. So I don't think he's in a bad predicament, and I think for this hypothetical rematch that we can expect, Daniel Cormier is bringing a lot of fanfare now that maybe wasn't there the first time around. Like, this could be an even bigger fight given just the time away for Jon Jones and what Daniel Cormier has done in that time. I mean, there is a lot of emotion in this rematch, pro and con for Daniel Cormier.
I have 2 theories. One of them is fans see too much of Daniel Cormier. They don't miss him enough. He's on Fox all the time. And if someone goes away for 3 months, they miss him, they appreciate him more. And I feel like it almost hurts him in a way to be on Fox so much, although he would say it helps his bank account, so he's not going to walk away from that. But I do think that that is actually something that happens here. I also kind of feel like, and correct me if you feel otherwise, there's a bit of like a 1999 Kurt Angle thing going on with Daniel Cormier, where he tells you like what you should feel and I'm the best and things like that. And it's kind of weird because he's an Olympic, athlete, didn't win a gold medal, but he reminds me a lot where everything on paper says he should be the hero, and yet the fans go against him. You get what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and I think
It's like sorry to interrupt. The next time they have a press conference, Jon Jones is going to get cheered because fans miss him, nostalgia. But think about what Jon Jones has done over the last 2 years, and think about what Daniel Cormier has done and stands for. It is absolutely ludicrous that Jones gets cheered more than DC, but that is going to happen.
No, and I think that, you just look at the life that this towel issue took. And granted, I believe that there is some due scrutiny to come Daniel Cormier's way for that. But to even put that on the level of how that possibly can be compared to the Jon Jones column of endless events that we have seen over the past number of years, I think with Jon Jones, that is just, it's a certain character trait that he possesses, that people just find him endearing. This guy who is, I mean, he's very cocky, he's very arrogant, and he wins. And people just gravitate to those winners. And I think they look at Jon Jones, that even through all of it, look what this guy has done with all of these problems, and imagining, well, according to Daniel Cormier, and look how clear his skin is now, man, what could Jon Jones possibly have in store now that he is rectified all of these problems? I just think you look at Jon Jones, and at its core, it's just, what could this guy be if everything was just in order for the guy? And that's going to be, to me, the question that will always be attached to Jon Jones. When we look back on his career, this is going to be a pivotal several number of years that we look back, and that what if question is going to be there.
Two last things on this fight. True or false, if they do fight in the near future, do you believe Dana White when he says they will not be in the main event? He is doubling down on this. He says they're going to be co-main. I don't trust Jon Jones. So true or false, if they fight again, near future, they won't be in the main event?
It will be the main event, and
you heard it here first.
It will not only be the main event, but I do see them using the tactic that we've seen utilized, is having two other light heavyweights on that card in the event of some problem. And Jimmy Manuwa could very likely be one of those. I think that would be definitely what you would want to have, is a Jimmy Manuwa fight on that card.
And by the way, credit to Manuwa for flying in. And on his Twitter yesterday, he said he was in Vegas. So I wonder if he went from London to Vegas to Buffalo, which makes no sense. But credit to him for actually coming here, I believe on his own, to be, you know, front and center and being a part of this discussion, because that doesn't happen if he's not here. So I think that was very astute on his part, I should say. And last thing on this particular fight, who wins, in your opinion? Who wins the rematch? I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier?
Who wins? Who's your prediction right now?
I hate making picks for fights that are so far away.
Just right now, what's your gut saying?
If they were to fight in a month,
July,
or August, I will go so far as to, I'm not going to bet against Jon Jones. I think, though, it's a much closer fight than had they fought a year ago. I think that there's a lot of questions and just the time away for Jon Jones. This is a very close fight, and I think that Daniel Cormier winning this fight, completely conceivable.
Okay, so you're going with Cormier, right? That was kind of like a sitting on the fence answer.
It was a sitting on the fence answer, although I'm not going to ask your pick, because I know I won't get that out of you.
I'm the one asking the questions here.
Well, Jon Jones would be my pick, just based on history and the fact that, you know, we haven't seen the guy beaten, and that's, you know, with all due respect to Matt Hamill.
All right, let's talk about the co-main event now, and that was the real controversial one. Chris Weidman wins the first round, get to the second round. Mousasi clearly winning, lands a knee. Referee Dan Mergliotta stops the fight momentarily because he believes it was an illegal knee. Upon further viewing, it wasn't an illegal knee. Chris Weidman didn't have his two hands on the ground. But in the state of New York, you can't go to the replay. Replay is not part of the system here. The referee is talking to Chris Weidman. The doctor enters the cage, and after mass confusion, they realize that A, it wasn't illegal, and B, they can't give him 5 minutes to recover. The doctor says the fight is off, he's out, he's not healthy enough to continue. Mousasi wins via controversial TKO. What do you make of how this all unfolded?
The perfect end to an event in the state of New York, I think, would be the best way to cap this off. I mean, this was just unfortunate for all sides involved. I don't think Gegard Mousasis takes a ton of momentum from a victory like this. And with Chris Weidman, I mean, this is technically now his third loss in a row. It just seems like there was no real winner in this whole thing, even though it goes down as one for Mousasi. I think this was, listen, human error is going to occur. I don't think that Dan Mergliotta should be crucified for a split-second decision. And I think on a larger point, I think this just perfectly typifies just the confusion of people not being aware of, from state to state, different changes that are occurring. And I think having the non-unified rules, these problems are going to happen every now and then. I think that the instant replay, I don't know how we got to that point. It just seems that, you know, every time something occurs, we suddenly look up the New York rule book and, hey, this rule's on the books, and it's news to everyone. And why was this exercised when it's already in place, that instant replay is not something that can occur in New York? So I feel that in a perfect situation, this fight largely should have been restarted. But unfortunately, Chris Weidman, the doctor assessed he could not continue. And it kind of goes back to Fabricio Verdum and Travis Brown back in Cleveland, where Travis Brown has some kind of an injury. He's turning his back and trying to call his own timeout. And again, the fight is not called off when that should have been a TKO finish. And that's ultimately what was called here. It was just a lot of confusion. Yeah. And I think it was unnecessary that a referee's error leads to a guy having a loss on his record rather than the fight proceeding and having a logical conclusion, which this one didn't.
Very unfortunate. It felt to me like Miragliotta reacted to Weidman's reaction, and that's why he stopped the fight. And then once they realized that this was a mess, they just said, okay, let's wash our hands of the situation. I agree with you. Probably should have just tried to forget about it, restart it. That would have been the most fair thing. And you have to feel for Chris Weidman because, as you said, 2 losses in a row. He sacrificed a lot going into this fight, you know, told the story of living on his own and potentially moving out, all this stuff. And now here he is. He was very emotional. Now here he is staring at 3 losses in a row. So on the flip side, you have Mousasi, who doesn't get the emphatic win that he wants, but a win is a win, 5 in a row. And now he's a free agent. And again, he's very vocal about wanting to get paid. Dana White saying on the record that he would like to have him back, but also saying, hey, the reason you don't get paid as much as a Hunt or a Hendo, you're not as big of a draw. After all this, do you think this was his last fight in the UFC, or do you expect to see him back?
The fact that Dana White was so public about wanting to keep this guy, this is not one where, you know, they're kind of sitting back and it's like, well, if we strike a deal, we do. This is not, to me, a Ryan Bader or Phil Davis kind of situation. This is someone that I think they covet, that they want. And Bellator being able to, at the end of the day, grab Gegard Mousasis, I think comes across as a real big win for Bellator. I think that they are going to be ultra aggressive when it comes to Gegard Mousasis, and someone that at 32 years of age with 50 fights on his record is, I mean, not too many guys with that kind of a resume that are competing at such a high level with so many fights on their track record at multiple weight classes. Gegard Mousasis, I think, is still in a very good position because he could really benefit from a bidding war. I think that this guy, if money is something that he sees as his biggest priority with this free agency testing, I think he's going to walk away with a big deal from one of these organizations. I think that both are going to kind of open the purse strings here, and I think the UFC is going to go above and beyond to try and retain him.
If Mousasi resigns, do you want to see that rematch right away, Weidman-Mousasi too?
I would love to see the rematch. I thought this was a really good fight up until the end. I think that, you know, Gegard Mousasis was certainly in control of the second round, and that would have been even going into the third. It's hard to, you know, guess how the rest of that second round would have played out, but I think this was a fight a lot of people were anticipating. 2 contenders at 185 pounds, so I would be fine with the rematch. I guess the question is going to be how long of a prolonged period is this free agency going to last with Gegard Mousasis? Is it going to be something that is drawn out? And a weird wrinkle to all of this is that Gegard Mousasis, are you necessarily jumping back into the UFC middleweight division? It's a lot of just placeholder fights amongst the top middleweights where it's kind of, yeah, I could fight a guy ranked 1 slot ahead of me, but what are we really fighting for? We're all waiting for this middleweight division to play itself out, and a lot of these middleweights, they would love to see an interim title installed just because this division's on hold for the time being.
Few more things before we go. Cynthia Calvillo defeats Pearl Gonzalez, 2nd straight month, 2nd straight pay-per-view. She looks very impressive. Dana White actually was sitting with her for a brief period at the press conference and compared how he felt about her to how he felt about Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Conor McGregor early in their UFC careers, which is high praise. Are you as high on her?
I mean, she passed her second test. I think that we should maybe cool the jets on comparisons at that high of a level. I mean, with all due respect to Pearl Gonzalez, this was a woman making her UFC debut, and this fight was very much centered around Cynthia Calvillo. So I feel that her next fight, I think you have to place her in with somebody certainly above the level of a Pearl Gonzalez, but I don't think she's ready to be thrown into the top echelon at strawweight. I don't think you would want to see her thrown against one of your marquee names at strawweight. This is something where I feel in the UFC, they have to learn what building stars is about, and sometimes it's going the slower path, which Bellator's caught in flack for. But you get to a certain point where it's a natural and organic build, and a talent is then ready for those bigger fights as opposed to just being thrown into the deep end. So I think everyone is somewhat reserved on Cynthia Calvillo. She shows a ton of potential, a lot of marketability, and looked really good tonight. And I think that now it's time to take one step further, but I think that we all have to kind of realize that this is a woman who's had 2 fights in the UFC.
In his return to 170, Thiago Alves beat Patrick Cote, but that really wasn't the story. The story was that Patrick Cote afterwards retired. He took off his gloves, put him in the middle of the cage again. We didn't really see this one coming, although it's not as shocking as the Rumble Johnson retirement. You spoke to Patrick afterwards. Did he give a specific reason as to why he feels like this is it?
Yeah, much like Anthony Johnson, he made this decision well ahead of time, that he just feels he's in a really good spot now. He's an analyst. He's got businesses. He has saved money. I mean, he's kind of this representation that I think a lot of fighters could learn from, of saving your money and having many options for yourself beyond fighting. He's 37 years old and kind of made this decision. This was going to be his last fight going into this. So for someone to have 21 fights in the UFC, that's something that not too many fighters are going to have. And I think he went into this fight that he just wanted to have an entertaining fight, which I think he did with Thiago Alves. And for Patrick Cote, I think he's going to have enough connection to the sport beyond just fighting, and kind of having that exit strategy, which he's always struck me as somebody that always did that this was not going to last forever. It's, make your money and then it's on to the next stage of your career and life.
Finally, before we go, Charles Oliveira submits Will Brooks in very impressive fashion. And just to stay with this wacky theme tonight, here's a guy who has a very hard time making 145, goes back to 155, beats one of the best 155ers in the world, former Bellator lightweight champion, and then it says, yeah, I'm going back down to 145. UFC told him to go to 155, says, no, I want to go back down to 145. How crazy is this decision on his part?
Oh, it's like going for a takedown on Daniel Cormier.
Well put.
Listen, I picked Charles Oliveira on this very previous show. I am very high on this guy, and he proved me right on Saturday night. And then he's talking about 145. It's like, why? You've had such problems. If I was the UFC, we are not booking you at 145 pounds. You are a liability to make 145 pounds. Let's just ride out this lightweight. Like, Will Brooks is not a small guy, and I feel Charles Oliveira owes it to himself to at least test the waters here, returning to 155 pounds. He looked fantastic, getting Will Brooks back and, submitting Will Brooks. That is a real achievement for him. I think Charles Oliveira, when you can take out all the stress of that weight cut and just the effects it would have on this guy during fight week, you have a super talented fighter that, again, he owes it to himself, I feel, to continue this path at 155.
Miles Jury, Shane Burgos, Caitlin Chukagian, Gregor Gillespie, Des Green, Magomed Bibuatov, some of the names who were victorious, or other names, I should say, who were victorious. Some nice performances. This card was somewhat much maligned going into tonight, but I thought overall it was a fun night, and again, a memorable one for those in attendance, 17,000 plus, and they broke the sporting event gate record here at the KeyBank Center in Buffalo. So all in all, a successful night for the UFC, and the folks over at WME, they now get the Jones DC fight, which I think is a more lucrative fight than Jones Rumble would have been, and would have been a huge mess had Rumble won the title and then vacated it. What a strange thing that would have been, right? Rumble winning the belt, vacating it, and then Jones suspended. Wow.
Imagine if...
I didn't even wrap my head around that scenario.
Imagine if Cormier had missed weight, so it was only a title fight for Johnson, and then he won and then vacated the title.
It has been a memorable week here in
bigger chaos.
Yes, kind of like back in December in Toronto. But in the end, the UFC dodges that bullet. Again, a very memorable return to Buffalo. It took 22 years for them to come here, and I think all in all, it was a successful return trip here to the City of Champions, home of the Bills. A few of them were in attendance. That was very exciting, including one Thurman Thomas, who I'm sure left very happy because his fellow Oklahoma State Cowboy, Daniel Cormier, was victorious tonight. All right, we are done. Good night, everyone. Thank you for watching our coverage all week long from here in Buffalo. We appreciate it very much. All the post-fight stuff is up on the website, so go check it out over at MMAfighting.com. Daniel Cormier gave us a shout-out, by the way. He said he saw his bare butt on our website, although I do think that we blurred it out just for the record.
Yeah,
so
this is the moon landing site.
Exactly. We're back on Monday for the MMA Hour. Check out all of Jon's interviews over at the Fight Network and thefightnetwork.com. Great stuff. Appreciate your time, and great stuff to Aaron yesterday from TSN for joining us on the preview show. Okay, everyone, good night, good morning. We'll see you Monday for the MMA Hour.